Good morning, everybody. It's Dan back in the GnarlyChicken garage. It's a Saturday morning, just waiting a nor'easter to blow through here. And I've got a buddy's 2009 CRF250X in the shop. He's been having trouble starting the bike. The first question I asked him was, when were the valves last checked? And he said they were done last year, so hopefully that's not the issue. And we're hoping that the issue is the carb. So, had to take the shock out completely to access the carb. It's really tight inside the twin spars, and even undoing the top shock bolt and moving it back a little bit still wasn't enough room to get at the carb. So that's what we're gonna get to here shortly. 2009. There's the shock. That probably needs it going over as well. Hopefully there will be a ton of crap inside the carb once I get it out, put on the bench, which I'll show you next. And we'll go from there. So we got the fire going on in the shop, got my coffee going, and we'll get back to you once I start turning the carb. So the carb is pretty much completely disassembled inside the frame. The only thing I have left to do right now is to disassemble the hot start, which is kind of hard to see, but it's this threaded piece here, which is where my finger is. It's a plastic piece, so that needs to be treated with care. After I get that taken off, I'll be able to pull the carb out and have a look. So one of the first things I like to do is get a bucket out, put it on the bench to put the carb in. Now I've cleaned this all out, and once I put the carb in, start draining all the fuel out of it into this bucket, we'll be able to tell just what exactly comes out of the carb by looking to see what it's left over inside this clean pan. And the other thing I need to do first is deal with the throttle position sensor. Now this has a little retaining clip in it, so instead of taking this off the carb and trying to get at that pin and then setting this again, which I'm not really keen on doing, is I'm just going to disconnect it from the terminal upstream, which is right here, with a little clip, and just keep that right off and separated altogether. And these are not fun because who knows when this was taken off last. And to get that out, just put a small flat blade screwdriver right inside this little pin connector right here and pry up on it. And while you're prying up on that, you can pull apart the connection. That went quite smoothly. So the hardest part about this was getting the hot start connection off. Now this is plastic, so I just slowly went around this knurled edge with a flat blade, and just very carefully and very slowly just loosened the threads on that. Took a while, but it's tight, but just go easy on this because it's plastic and you can ruin them. So carb is out, and it's pretty gnarly on the outside, but we're gonna check inside the float here and see what comes out of that. You can see quite a bit of residue inside. Now a lot of that's been falling off from it's just sitting here suspended inside the frame, but we'll have a look inside the bowl here and see what that reveals to us. So the first thing I'll do with a 17 mil is take this bottom bowl trap door off, and then very easily and very gently go at the bowls, the 4 Phillips screws, and take the bowl off. Be very careful when you're taking these off because they are easily stripped. So make sure you've got lots of downward pressure. And here's the bottom of the float drain. Hard to see here, but there's a nice large chunk of something at the bottom of that, so that's a good sign. So I've got 3 of the 4 float bowl Phillips loosened. But this is how easy it is to strip these bolts. This little retaining bracket right here that holds one of the vent lines, this was filled with dirt, so you couldn't even tell that this was a Phillips on here. So some people will try to take the bowl off either from down here, which is not the connection, or they'll put something else in here not knowing that this is a Phillips and strip this out, and now you're into another process, which is not fun. So make sure these are cleaned out. I'm just using a pick to clean this out. And I'm going to apply, like the other 3, hard downward force and see if my good screwdriver, Phillips screwdriver, actually sits in there first, and I should be able to hear snap when that comes loose. I can't really put this on camera because somebody has my mount, but just listen for the snap if I can get it. There you go. That's the snap you want to hear. Alright, we've got 3 of the 4 out, and just taking the last one out. May have to take one more out. Keep track of these fasteners. It's always a good idea too when you take them out to put them in your, I keep mine in my magnetic bowl, but when you are taking them out, just make sure they're all the same length. And these ones are, so there's not really any worry about putting them back in the wrong holes. Now I may have to take this guy off. Yeah, just to loosen him up some. To get him out of the way. There we go. He's the small one that holds that cable in line, and that's your knob for your idle screw. So should be disconnected. The line's kind of free. Off, have a look. This is a first. I've never seen. Alright, what does this tell us? It's not too bad actually. See any kind of grime or dirt in there, so that looks pretty good inside the bowl, but doesn't mean that the jets aren't clogged up. That's what we'll get at to here next. So we'll take the jets out, and this jet was quite loose. I had to use no force at all to get this fella out. Now, he is a 155, so that is the main jet. And that's pretty clean. I don't see anything in that. Let's see what the other ones reveal. Hold on these just start twisting them, because they are just brass, which means easily stripped out. So this is your pilot. Let's have a look inside the pilot. It looks pretty good, but I'll blow him out as well. This guy's tight. Through him, and I can already tell that he looks pretty good too. Not really sure what this is all about. Someone just put a cover on. Looks different. Definitely does not look like a stock part. In any event, the setting is supposed to be on that. I believe. So I took the float off just to check the needle valve, thinking that that might be an issue, but the needle valve looks fine. The rubber around the nipple of the valve is still in good condition, so that wasn't really an issue anyway. The bike wasn't leaking fuel when it was on the side stand, which is usually the indication that he's going bad, but I wanted to take it apart and have a look at it anyway, so it looks good. Alright, everything's looking pretty decent. I cleaned out, this isn't a full carb job, as you can see. I haven't disassembled the whole carb, and that wasn't part of the plan when I told them I'd look at this for them. So the outside, you know, has still got dirt encased on it, but the bowl itself is clean. The throats are clean. The needles are all clean. Everything else has been cleaned out and looks good. So I'll just have a few more little peeks at a few little items in here and start putting back together. Okay, float bowl back in place. Hook is in good position, so it's moving freely. And I like the way that this is lined up. When you're tipping the bowl, it's moving freely. And when you've got it even, the lines are lined up with the bottom of the float bowl ridge right here. So that looks good to me. So getting the carb back together again, just want to go over little things that are overlooked sometimes with carbs. When you're putting the vent lines back on, a couple of vent lines have these little tabs, connectors. Now these little connectors fit on this one for the vent lines, right on the screws of the float bowl. Now, sometimes when you take these off, they can get confusing which way they go back on again, but a good rule of thumb to look at is each one of these tabs, 2 of them, have these small little indents, these small little holes. There's the hole for the screw, there's the hole alongside of it, and that little hole fits right over this little tab right here. I don't know if you can see it or not, but this little guy right here is where those tabs fit onto to secure them in place. So just keep that in mind when you're putting these back together. So that's what it should look like when you put these little tabs back in place again. Sorry for the lighting. So all 4 float bowl screws are back in place, and you're going to tighten those just the same way you took them off, very carefully with lots of downward force, but don't over tighten. Okay, carb is put back together, and now the arduous task of setting this back in the machine, hooking up the push-pull, hooking up the TPS, and the hot start. And we'll see how that goes. Okay, what I had to do to get this hot-cold starter cable started inside the carb was come up to the top and completely take it apart up here. Take it right out of the switch lever and pull it down to give me some slack, which is just down in here, so I could pull up and down on this to there's the end of it right there, flipping around. So I could actually have some movability without stripping those plastic threads. So there was just no way to get that started while that cable was in its fixed location. So undo it up here, and you'll be able to pull it through and give yourself lots of room and put it in. Okay, hot start is successfully screwed back in, and carb is mounted in the intake boot just temporarily, but it's in place. So now I'm going to hook the hot start back up here again and get that set. And then the next task will be hooking up the throttle push-pulls, which, as you can see, there's not a lot of room down there to play around with. So this should be interesting. But anyway, we'll just one piece at a time. All right, the hot start is back in place. So what I had to do to disassemble this whole thing was loosen off the whole clutch perch assembly so I can move this up and down. And I backed off the clutch play with this knob here, which is nice on this bike. So I had lots of slack in the clutch so I can move this around, and then you just back off these 2 nuts right here, an 8 and a 10 mil, and that will loosen the cable, and then you just pull the little cable from underneath its housing underneath here and free this line up, and that enabled me to have lots of slack to put the hot start back in the carb. Putting it back together, loosen this off as much as you can with peel back this rubber boot here. There's another nut down in here, and you can move this nut, and that will loosen these ones off as well. That will allow you to have some slack in here in the line. And just take a pair of needle nose pliers, feed everything back through the boot, grab the needle nose and set it underneath its little housing here, the actual cable itself, and then it will just feed back in to this little groove in here, which houses the cable. And then when you've got that in play with lots of slack, just put the boot back on and then tighten back up this little nut inside this housing. This just pushes right back. And play with your settings some to make sure you've got a little bit of not too much slack in here, which I do. And I hard to do this with my hand. Anyway, there you go. That goes back into place. You should have a little bit of slack here, just like your clutch cable. He can play with that how he wants it. So that should be good to go. And now we're going to start with the throttle cables on the other side. Okay, we've got the throttle hooked back up again. Hard to see, sorry. This is a push-pull throttle. So you've got to make sure you get those little tiny retaining brackets on the outside of the assembly, like they are. These little tabs right here. And then you can just slacken off enough cable on each end to wrap the cables into their little spots right here. So it takes a little adjusting to do, but you just take your time. Those little set screws sit right in their little channels in there, and once you've got it in play or in place, you can just play with the throttle a little bit. You should have a little bit of movement, which we do, and then that should pull freely and snap back again, which you've got right here. And the throttle is, the slide's opening up the whole way and closing the whole way. Snaps back nicely into place. And now all I'm going to do is those little 8mm nuts are in their little channels and locked. Now all I'll do is come up here and tighten down these adjusters with a 10mm to make sure they're tight. Okay, so the bike's back together. I got the car back on. It's so tight in here, however, that the back boot isn't sealing. So I'm going to attempt to take off the front neck here, disassemble that, get the carb on the rear boot, and then slide everything back into place, hopefully. But it's so tight with vent lines. There's another vent line down in here that it was just an absolute bear to get to. The tolerances are just crazy. I've never seen anything like this before. Shocks back in, and need to take a little break, so I'll go back to work on that. Okay, we have it back together. I don't think I ever want to work on a CRF250X Carb again. I used some WD-40 and was able to finally seat that boot back there. Back in, I'm going to give my buddy a call and tell him to come get her.